There is a silent tragedy that unfolds within certain individuals, a burden not seen by the eyes of the world, but carried heavily within the heart. It is the agony of perceiving too much, of understanding too deeply, of glimpsing the hidden structures behind human nature, society, and existence itself. Those who carry this burden often find themselves isolated, not because they are abandoned, but because their vision stretches far beyond the ordinary horizons. Today, we will step into that quiet world, where intelligence is not merely a gift, but a profound and often painful responsibility. Head-hating awareness and emotional sensitivity are often both a gift and a curse. For individuals with profound intelligence, to be intelligent in this deeper sense is not merely to think quickly or to solve complex problems. It is to perceive layers of reality that others do not even notice exist. This heightened perception extends beyond intellectual matters and moves into emotional and existential realms, where one feels the weight of hidden truths, subtle contradictions, and underlying tensions in the world around them. The intelligent mind becomes like a finely tuned instrument, resonating not just with the obvious, but also with the unspoken, the invisible, the fragile structures upon which ordinary life is built. When others see a smile, the intelligent soul may see the mask hiding profound sadness. When others hear a promise, the perceptive mind detects the tremor of uncertainty or manipulation behind it. There is a constant awareness of what is not being said, what is being denied, and what is being evaded. This deeper sensitivity to nuance makes ordinary social interactions far more exhausting, because where many can glide over the surface of life, the one who sees too much feels dragged into the undertow of complexities that others are blind to. Every conversation becomes layered with possible meanings. Every silence carries an unsaid burden. Every act of kindness may also contain hidden motives. There is no true escape from the torrent of interpretations that the mind generates. This emotional sensitivity extends to the world at large. Global suffering, injustice, corruption, cruelty, things that others might rationalize or ignore, wound the intelligent and sensitive individual deeply. It is not because they are weaker, but because they are less able to erect the psychological defenses that most people unconsciously rely upon. They cannot help but empathize too much, feel too much, and think too much about problems for which there seem to be no easy solution. Their compassion is not a passive sentiment. It is an active wound, an ache that persists in the face of every new piece of knowledge they acquire about the suffering of others. This heightened awareness can lead to an inner fragmentation, a state where the individual feels torn between the idealism of what could be and the crushing reality of what is. They see the potential for beauty, justice, and connection, but are constantly bombarded by the failures of the human world to live up to those potentials. They become sensitive not only to their own pain, but also to the collective pain of humanity, often carrying more emotional weight than their own lives would seem to warrant. This is not a burden that can be easily shared or explained to others, for the very act of articulating it often feels impossible. Language itself seems inadequate to capture the subtlety and magnitude of what is felt. Thus, the burden of heightened awareness is not simply about being smarter or quicker. It is about living with a constant influx of realities, emotions, and contradictions that others are free to ignore. It is about navigating a world where ignorance truly is bliss for the majority, but where the intelligent and sensitive soul is condemned to see and feel what others cannot, or will not see. Their very consciousness becomes both a torch illuminating hidden truths and a flame that burns the hand that holds it. Isolation and the feeling of alienation are nearly inevitable companions for those who carry the burden of deep intelligence and perception. It is not simply that the intelligent individual chooses to be alone, but that the very structure of their mind and the depth of their awareness create a natural distance between themselves and the majority of those around them. When one sees the world in more intricate patterns, when one feels emotions with a sharper edge and thinks thoughts that move beyond conventional boundaries, there comes a painful realization. Very few people will truly understand, and even fewer will have the desire or capacity to engage on that level. This distance begins early for many. As children, the intelligent may notice inconsistencies in adult behavior, question assumptions that others accept without hesitation, or feel dissatisfaction with simplistic explanations. These early experiences plant the seeds of alienation as they realize that asking too many questions, seeing too deeply, or speaking too honestly often provokes discomfort or rejection rather than curiosity. Over time, a form of self-protection develops, where parts of their inner life are kept hidden, tucked away in private mental spaces, because revealing them would only intensify the sense of not belonging. The alienation is not merely social, it is existential. The highly perceptive mind finds itself confronting questions and realities that most are able to sidestep. Why is there suffering? Why is there so much cruelty, so much hypocrisy, so much meaningless repetition in human behavior? These are not abstract philosophical musings, but urgent and painful realizations that strike at the core of one's being. It becomes difficult to participate in everyday conversations about trivial matters, not because of arrogance, but because of the sheer weight of what one carries inside. Small talk feels unbearably small. Shallow pleasures feel hollow. Obligatory social rituals become performances rather than genuine engagements. Attempts to bridge this gap often lead to further disappointment. Expressing one's deeper thoughts can result in misunderstanding, mockery, or a kind of polite dismissal that wounds more deeply than open hostility. Over time, the intelligent individual may retreat further into themselves, seeking solace in books, art, solitude, or inner contemplation. They may long for connection, for a kindred spirit who sees and feels with equal intensity, but such encounters are rare and often fleeting. The result is a profound loneliness, not merely the loneliness of physical solitude, but the deeper loneliness of being unseen and recognized at the level that matters most. Yet, this isolation carries within it a paradoxical richness. It forces the intelligent soul to become self-reliant, to seek meaning within rather than depending on external validation. It sharpens their inner vision and deepens their understanding of themselves and the world. In the silence of alienation, they may discover dimensions of thought and feeling that would have remained inaccessible in the noise of constant social interaction. The pain of isolation thus becomes, for some, a crucible through which true individuality and authentic wisdom are forged. It is a lonely path, but also a path that leads, ultimately, to a deeper kind of communion, not necessarily with many others, but with the profound realities that underlie existence itself. Existential weight and the search for meaning are burdens that often accompany those who see too much and understand too deeply. When an individual possesses the ability to peer beyond the immediate surface of life and grasp its underlying uncertainties, contradictions, and sufferings, they are forced to confront questions that most people avoid as long as they can. While others may find comfort in routines, traditions, and unquestioned beliefs, the highly perceptive soul finds these external structures insufficient, fragile, and often hypocritical. There is an inner compulsion to ask why life is as it is and whether it could ever be otherwise. And these questions are not casual, but profound, affecting the very structure of one's existence. At the core of this burden is the recognition that life is inherently unpredictable, that suffering is woven into the very fabric of human experience, and that meaning is not something that can be passively received, but must be actively sought and created. This realization shatters many of the illusions that others depend upon for comfort. The illusion of permanence, the illusion of fairness, the illusion of a world where virtue is always rewarded and evil punished. The intelligent mind, seeing the world in its brutal honesty, cannot accept such comforting narratives without feeling an inner falseness. As a result, the search for meaning becomes an urgent, lifelong endeavor, not a luxury or a pastime, but a necessity for survival. Yet the search itself is fraught with difficulty. The more one understands, the more one realizes how partial and limited all human systems of meaning are. Philosophical systems, religious doctrines, political ideologies, all are seen to be, at best, partial glimpses of truth, and at worst, self-serving deceptions. This can lead to a deep skepticism, even a nihilism, where one doubts whether any true meaning exists at all. However, the soul that is both intelligent and courageous does not remain in nihilism. Rather, it faces the abyss, looks into it with steady eyes, and begins the work of constructing a meaning that is authentic, personal, and resilient. This work is painful and lonely, for it requires rejecting easy answers and enduring the anxiety of uncertainty. It demands a willingness to suffer without succumbing to despair, to hope without naivety, to act without the guarantee of success. It is a path that does not lead to quick rewards or external validation, but offers instead an inner coherence, a sense of integrity that arises from living in alignment with truths that have been hard-won through struggle and reflection. The existential burden also manifests in the way one relates to time and mortality. While others may easily distract themselves from the reality of death, the perceptive individual carries an acute awareness of life's fragility and impermanence. Every choice, every relationship, every project takes on a deeper significance when viewed against the backdrop of mortality. This awareness can be overwhelming, filling ordinary moments with a gravity that others may find incomprehensible. Yet it also offers the possibility of a richer, more profound engagement with life, where nothing is taken for granted, and even the smallest experiences are infused with meaning because they are recognized as finite and irreplaceable. In facing the existential weight, the intelligent soul is called not only to understand but to affirm, not only to see but to act, not only to question but to create. This is not a path of comfort, but it is a path of profound depth, a path that leads to a life that, though marked by sorrow, is also illuminated by an authentic and hard-earned joy. The difficulty in communicating deep insights to others is one of the most quietly painful aspects of carrying profound intelligence and perception. When someone sees life with extraordinary depth and nuance, it becomes almost impossible to translate their internal experience into language that others can easily grasp. Language, while a powerful tool, is ultimately a limited medium. It can hint at the complexity of thought and feeling, but it often falls short of truly conveying the richness, the contradictions, the subtle interconnections that the deeply perceptive mind holds. Every attempt to express profound insights feels like painting an intricate, multidimensional reality using only crude, two-dimensional strokes. This difficulty leads to frequent experiences of misunderstanding. What the intelligent individual says might be misinterpreted, oversimplified, or dismissed altogether, not out of malice, but because most people are not accustomed to thinking or feeling at that depth. The reactions of others can range from polite confusion to irritation or even hostility, as if the very act of pointing out uncomfortable truths were a personal attack. These responses create an invisible wall between the one who sees too much and the many who are content to see less. Over time, the burdened individual may come to anticipate misunderstanding as the norm rather than the exception, leading to a painful sense of isolation, even when surrounded by others. There is also a deep internal conflict that arises in the act of communication. On one hand, there is a yearning to be understood, to bridge the gap between the inner world and the outer world, to find even one person who can meet them in the place where their soul resides. On the other hand, there is the recognition that speaking fully and honestly often results in alienation or even resentment. Thus, a painful compromise emerges: to communicate only partially, to withhold the deeper layers of perception in order to maintain relationships, to protect oneself from the loneliness that comes when one reveals too much. This selective communication creates a sense of living a double life, an outer life of simplified exchanges, and an inner life of profound solitude. The difficulty is not only intellectual, but emotional. When profound insights are met with blank stares or awkward silences, it reinforces the feeling of being fundamentally disconnected from the collective human experience. It breeds a sense of exile, not from a place, but from a shared reality. The intelligent and perceptive individual becomes a stranger, even among friends, an outsider, even in familiar setting. The heart longs for communion, but the mind knows how rare true communion is for those who have seen behind the veil of ordinary appearances. At times, the burdened individual may attempt to suppress their deeper insights, to conform, to speak more simply, to pretend not to see what they see. Yet this suppression is itself painful, a kind of inner betrayal, a self-amputation of the very faculties that make life meaningful. Over time, many come to accept that full understanding by others may never occur, and instead turn their efforts inward, seeking to build a robust inner life that does not depend on external validation. They may also find solace in art, philosophy, or the rare conversations with those few others who also carry the burden of deep perception. Communication, then, becomes less about being fully understood and more about planting seeds, small fragments of truth left behind for those who are ready to hear, whenever they may be. The tension between understanding human suffering and the inability to alleviate it is one of the most agonizing dilemmas faced by those who possess deep intelligence and heightened perception. To see suffering with clarity, to recognize the complex and often invisible threads that weave pain into people's lives, is to bear witness to a kind of tragedy that is almost unbearable. The highly perceptive individual does not simply observe suffering from a distance. They feel it, absorb it, carry it within their own being. They recognize how early wounds, societal failures, unconscious patterns, and existential fears all conspire to perpetuate cycles of misery, not because people are inherently evil, but because of blindness, ignorance, fear, and a desperate clinging to what is familiar. To see all this is to be tempted by the hope that understanding alone could be enough to heal. If only others could see what the perceptive mind sees, perhaps they would act differently, love differently, live differently. Yet reality often proves otherwise. Insight, no matter how profound, cannot be forced upon another. Change requires readiness, willingness, courage, qualities that cannot be given as gifts but must arise within each individual in their own time, if at all. This realization brings with it a deep sorrow, a mourning for the countless lives trapped in needless suffering simply because the door to transformation, though visible, remains unopened. The perceptive individual often feels a tremendous responsibility, a desire to intervene, to guide, to heal, yet attempts to do so frequently end in frustration or backlash. Offering unsolicited insights is often met with resistance, denial, or even anger. People cling fiercely to their familiar pain, not out of irrationality, but because that pain has become a part of their identity, their known world. To change would require the death of that identity and the passage through a terrifying unknown. Witnessing this, the intelligent soul understands that compassion must replace judgment, patience must replace urgency, and silent support must sometimes replace action. Yet even knowing this does not diminish the ache of helplessness. To love humanity and to see its avoidable suffering is to exist in a perpetual state of heartbreak. It is to recognize the dignity and potential within each person while also acknowledging the crushing weight of their invisible chains. It is to walk a tightrope between hope and despair, between engagement and withdrawal. The temptation to retreat into cynicism is strong, for cynicism offers the false comfort of detachment, but the perceptive heart knows that to surrender to cynicism would be another form of death, the death of compassion, the death of meaning. Thus, the individual who carries deep understanding must also cultivate a kind of radical humility. They must recognize the limits of their power, the necessity of respecting each soul's journey, however painful it may be. They must learn to offer their insights as seeds rather than weapons, to plant them gently in the hope that they may one day bear fruit, even if that fruit ripens long after they are gone. They must learn to carry their sorrow without being crushed by it, to find beauty even in the brokenness, and to continue believing in the possibility of transformation even when it seems impossibly distant. This delicate, painful balance is not weakness, but a profound form of strength, a testament to the enduring nobility of the human spirit, even in the face of overwhelming suffering. The loneliness of the soul that sees too clearly is a solitude that is not simply a matter of being physically alone, but a profound and existential isolation, rooted in the very structure of perception itself. When an individual perceives life with an unusual depth, seeing both the beauty and the horror of existence laid bare, it creates a chasm between them and the rest of the world. It is not a loneliness born out of rejection or abandonment in the conventional sense, but a loneliness that stems from the inability to fully share what they know, what they sense, and what they experience. It is the solitude of standing on a mountaintop where few others can climb, where the air is thinner, the view clearer, and the silence deeper. Such a soul often carries within it an awareness that the frameworks which provide most people with a sense of belonging, social conventions, shared myths, collective illusions, cannot fully hold them. They have seen behind the veil, and thus cannot simply re-enter the game of life with the same innocence as before. They recognize the contradictions, the unconscious drives, the unspoken fears that govern human behavior, and though they may still participate in society, they do so with a sense of estrangement, as if moving through a world that is both intimately familiar and infinitely alien. This existential loneliness can be crushing, especially in moments when the desire for genuine connection rises up strongly. The longing to be seen, truly seen, to be understood without explanation, is a natural human need, and yet the perceptive soul often finds that such understanding is exceedingly rare. Conversations that stay on the surface feel hollow. Relationships built on unexamined assumptions feel fragile. And even well-meaning companionship can leave a deep ache of unfulfillment. The individual may attempt to bridge the gap by simplifying themselves, by speaking in the language others can hear, by hiding the full extent of their perception. But this strategy, while sometimes necessary for survival, comes at a great inner cost. A fragmentation of the self, a constant balancing act between authenticity and accessibility. Over time, many who carry this burden learn to make peace with their solitude. They turn inward, cultivating a rich inner world where the soul can stretch out without restriction, where the mind can follow its inquiries to their natural conclusions without fear of misunderstanding or rejection. They may find solace in art, literature, philosophy, or nature. Domains where depth is honored rather than feared. They come to cherish those rare moments of true connection when they occur, recognizing them as precious gifts rather than everyday expectations. This loneliness, painful as it is, also has a strange beauty to it. It creates a space for reflection, for intimacy with one's own soul, for a deeper communion with the mysteries of existence itself. It sharpens the senses, deepens compassion, and strengthens the resilience of the spirit. It teaches the soul to stand alone, not in bitterness, but in a quiet strength that arises from knowing oneself intimately and accepting the world as it is, rather than as one wishes it to be. In this solitude, the soul learns that while complete understanding from others may be rare, the journey toward understanding oneself and the world is endlessly rich and meaningful. The loneliness does not disappear, but it transforms from a wound into a companion, a silent witness to the strange, beautiful, and often tragic gift of seeing the world too clearly. The journey of profound perception is not an easy one. It demands the strength to carry sorrow without succumbing to despair, the courage to speak truth even when met with silence, and the resilience to remain open-hearted in the face of overwhelming complexity. To see too much is to live at the edge of human experience, where the beauty and terror of existence are revealed without illusion. Yet, it is precisely this burden that shapes the soul into something vast, something enduring, something capable of touching the infinite. The loneliness, the misunderstandings, the sorrow. All of it becomes part of a larger, sacred task, to bear witness to reality in its fullness, and through that witnessing, to carve a path of meaning not just for oneself, but for all who one day might find the courage to see.